Shabbat Shalom. I'm coming to you from my apartment here in New York City. I want to thank the rabbi for giving me the chance to give a devar. And I want to thank Benji for all of the technical wizardry that is happening right now that I certainly could not do. I've jerry-rigged a ridiculous setup, as I think we all are, so I have a sort of teleprompter here, so I'll apologize if I lean forward to be able to look through my notes. And yes, I have guitar. Yes, I'll play guitar. This is my first Shabbat playing a guitar publicly, so my apologies and my hope that you'll be gentle with me. I want to take a moment and ask you to look at the words that Benji is displaying. They are from Mishkan Tefillah, our Siddur. They're from the Shabbat morning service, and they're from a prayer that we call Elohai, or Elohai Neshama. Elohai Neshama Shenatata Bi Tehorahi. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. Ata v'rata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. You created it, you formed it, you placed it in me. Ve'ata mishamara bikirbi, and you protect it within me. This prayer thanks God for the creation of and the inherent purity of our souls. We insist that God not only created and placed our souls, but that God actively works to protect them from harm. This idea of the incorruptible purity that comes of being a creation of God, it's a beautiful and comforting image. And it also feels completely at odds with some of the messages we receive from Torah. In the portion of the Torah that we read this week, which we call Tazria Metzora, God spends an awful lot of time warning us about impurity. Specifically, these passages in Leviticus tell us how to recognize skin diseases and how we should respond if and when we detect them. The response is generally for the person to be banished to a place outside the camp until the disease is gone. Now, you might argue that there's some logic here, that someone with a contagious disease needs to be quarantined to protect the community. Certainly these days, having seen the effects of the coronavirus on the world and contemplating how much worse they might be without our stay-at-home orders, one can't help but see why a quarantine seemed like the safest choice for the early Israelite community. Still, this idea of a human being so impure that they must abandon their entire community is so at odds with how we believe the ill should be treated now, that we may be tempted to write the section of Torah off altogether. And if that still doesn't bother you, let me point out that this portion also includes childbirth and menstruation as events that make someone impure. Now, you might point out that the Torah is dealing with the purity of a physical body rather than a soul. That's a fair point. But it also helps to understand why the Torah was so fixated on purity. You see, the Israelites were carrying with them a movable tabernacle in which the Spirit of God dwelled. This Spirit was the ultimate essence of purity, and being too close to this entity while being physically impure could literally be deadly. People died just from being too close to the Spirit while having blood on their skin. So you see, these strictures about bodily purity, they weren't just about protecting the community. They were about protecting the individual from the danger of being impure in the presence of the perfection of God. Now, I'll be honest, I have never thought of myself as a particularly physically pure guy. You've seen me devour everything the sisterhood volunteers bake for the Oneg, haven't you? Yeah? Those cinnamon blondies, by the way, those are like my nemesis, honestly. But for all my potential impurity, I'm often very close to the Ark and the sanctuary, where we keep multiple Torahs, and I've never felt in danger of dying being near any of them. So, yeah, I think we can put away this idea of physical impurity as a danger to ourselves in the presence of God and Torah. But what about the purity of the soul? The soul God created and placed in me was pure, but in our very modern and very secular world, it can be so easy to fill that soul with impurities. Political discussions lately have made it easy to feel hate toward people that disagree with us. Personal and financial concerns can make us cruel to strangers that don't deserve our anger. And yes, the threat of diseases like coronavirus can make us act with such irrational fear as to make us a greater danger to our community than a disease itself could ever manifest. And yet, in our holy sanctuary or in Zoom, or anywhere we invoke our connection to the divine, we may do even greater and more lasting damage because by our proximity to God and Torah, we have the ability to convince ourselves that our hate and our cruelty and our fear are divinely justified. We can all think of people who use their religious fervor to excuse bigotry and prejudice. Can we honestly say that this is an impulse to which we are all immune? When we approach God, when we offer prayers for the strength to act, and when we use Torah to guide our decisions, whether we will truly transform those prayers and those decisions into good in our world will depend entirely on the purity in our souls. If our souls are impure, then we are a danger to our community and to ourselves. But don't forget, Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorai. The soul that God has given you is pure. That purity is your starting point, your default state. Despite the news and our own anxieties trying to convince us otherwise, human beings are fundamentally good, honest, kind, well-meant people. When we feel hate or anger, we may muddy that purity for a bit, and in that time we can harm others. But just as Torah told the Israelites then how to purify their bodies, Torah can tell us today how to purify our hearts. Before we attempt to approach God, let's fill our hearts with love. Let's seek to understand and assume the best of each other. Let's believe that working together will resolve our greatest challenges, and that in the meantime, fearing them will do nothing for us. And let us find gratitude for the many miracles we experience each and every day, including the gift of life itself. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Sing along with me. Elohai, Elohai, Keshavela, Shenatata bi tehorahi. Ata berata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. Ta mishamela, mishama bikiri. Elohai, Elohai, mishamela, shenatata bi. As we struggle with our responsibilities to life and each other, may we take care not to invoke God too easily or to criticize our fellow human too angrily, and instead see the purity of the soul that rests in us all. Shabbat Shalom.